Hello, everyone. I'm Therese Bacon, Financial Education Specialist with MSU-FCU, and I welcome you to our Financial Education Seminar Series. We're so glad that you could all join us this evening. These sessions were created with you in mind, really to just designed to give you practical, relatable financial education that helps you feel a little more confident in navigating your money. We have a wide range of presentations planned throughout the year, and you can explore upcoming topics and register for those by visiting msufcu.org/events. Today's event is also being recorded, and you can watch any of our other recordings or share those with friends if you'd like by visiting our YouTube channel, youtube.com/msufcu, and then selecting the seminar series from that playlist. And if you have any questions that come up at any point during the presentation, just go ahead and use that Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit those questions. And then when I get to the end of the presentation, we'll go ahead and address those. All right. So tonight we will be talking about money and relationships. So our agenda, we're going to talk about, money and family, money and friends, money and partners, and just those relationships and how money kind of plays into it all in dealing with those relationships on an everyday basis. And just a quick reminder, what I'm sharing here are suggestions, not personal financial advice. Everyone's situation is a little different. So my goal is just to give you ideas and some different strategies that can make money talks feel a little less intimidating. All right. So money can really shape all kinds of relationships, right? Family, friends, coworkers, even how we connect with our partners. So it's one of those things that's kind of always there in the background, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, right? So the tricky part is that we all learn about money a little differently, right? Maybe your parents never talked about it, so you had to figure that out all on your own. Or maybe you grew up in a house where every dollar was budgeted and tracked. So those early lessons really stick with us, and they shape how we save, how we spend, and even how we, invest later on in life. So when two people come together, say roommates splitting rent, or a couple trying to decide on a vacation, you got two sets of money values kind of colliding there, and that's what can really cause some friction. So one person might think we should save every extra dollar, while the other person says, hey, let's enjoy life while we can. So neither person is really wrong, but without talking it out and communicating through that, it can definitely lead to some tension, right? And yeah, here's some research to back that up. So 55% of Americans say that money is a major source of conflict at home. And the same survey found that in 2022, financial stress hit the highest level it had been in nearly 10 years. So probably not really surprising with how things have been going these past few years here. All right, so let's get into money and family. So money and family can be a tough mix sometimes, right? Relationships with the people closest to us can get complicated kind of when money kind of enters the picture, or tensions with money enters the picture. So one thing to remember is to stay realistic about what you can afford. So for example, maybe the family wants to go on a big vacation, but your budget really only stretches for a little weekend trip, right? So it's better to be upfront about that with your family than to really stretch yourself too thin, stretch your budget too thin, and then feel maybe resentful towards them later or guilty that you overspent that month, right? So it also helps to start talking about money with your kids at an early age if you are raising children now or have young people in your life. So you want to talk to them in ways that they can understand. So, I started this when my kids were just little. I'd give them a couple of dollars at the grocery store, let them pick out something, right? So even just from a young age, it kind of taught them that choices have limits, right? Um, so sometimes they couldn't get the thing that they wanted. They had to choose something different so that they could stay within their own budget, right? So even those simple things that you can start early can be really helpful in the long run. And then as they grow, you can give them more responsibility with money. So, um, maybe you'll cover half the cost of their first car, right? But they'll need to save for the other half or pay for their gas or insurance or some portion of that, right? So having those conversations early is really going to set up those clear expectations and probably avoid some tension later on as those things come up. So the big theme here with all of these things is really clarity, right? Being honest about what you can and can't do financially, and then gradually giving kids real experience with money so they can learn some of those things on their own as well. And sometimes family members struggle financially, and naturally we want to help them, right? But support doesn't always have to mean just handing over the money, right? You can support in other ways. It could mean babysitting for them so that they could work some overtime or helping them meal plan. Maybe you're really good at that. Maybe you like to cook. Maybe go over there on Sunday, help them meal plan for the week so they can kind of save money at the grocery store or save money from going out to eat every night when they're, running late after work or running the kids around to sports after work or whatever it may be. But really, also connecting them with financial education resources like this, right? So that can really be a big help in the long term. So another example of this, like with my oldest daughter here, recently she had to get new tires for her car, right? So instead of just giving her that money, I helped her research tire discounts and even drove her around to the local shops that kind of offered maybe financing options even. So it was that support that really helped solve the problem, not just handing over the money to solve the problem, right? And it gave her some of those tools that she could build up for the next time she has to do something like that. So those real life experiences can really be helpful. Another important piece is actually talking with family about money, right? These conversations don't have to be heavy or stressful. They can be about values, shared values, shared goals, and building up those good habits. So, an example here, maybe one sibling saves, this type of kids. One sibling is a saver, right? So every gift card they get, they save it, right? They want to save those up for a special purchase. The other one has to spend it immediately, right? Gets it for their birthday, asks you to take them to the store. So talking through those different approaches with each of them and together can kind of help everyone understand where the other person is kind of coming from, right? And the pros and cons of both of those ways of living. But once each other's shared values, if you're communicating those, it's going to be easier to make family decisions together, like planning a trip or helping with the aging parents' care, right? Maybe you have to have these conversations with your adult siblings, right? If you're taking care of aging parents, or figuring out how much everyone can pitch in for, holiday gifts before Christmas is right around the corner, right? So having those conversations is really key to keeping things comfortable and open, so that no one feels judged, right? So no one feels guilty. But yes, can definitely be a big help there. All right, so money and family continued here. Family and business. So mixing family and business is a little more common than people think, right? About 75% of entrepreneurs and over 80% of established business owners work with family in some type of way, right? So here's the kicker. Less than 1 in 5 of those actually has a conflict resolution type of plan built into that business. So there's a lot of family businesses kind of just winging it when thinking about different disagreements that might come up. So if you've ever worked with family, it can get tricky. One day you're talking about payroll, the next day you're sitting across from each other at Thanksgiving dinner. So, without those clear boundaries, business stress can really spill over into family life very fast. Another tip is to notice how the business stress kind of affects your moods at home. So if a sibling or a spouse is having a rough week with the business, can really color their reactions, with immediate family too. So just being aware of that can really prevent some unnecessary conflict as well. So bottom line here, if you're in business with family, take that time to create that clear conflict resolution process and kind of set some of those boundaries between business hours and family hours. can really save relationships in the long run, for sure. Sorry. All right. Okay, let's move on to money and friends. So, talking about money with friends can feel a little bit awkward at first, but it can actually strengthen your friendship and help everyone in the financial, on their financial journey. So sometimes a simple conversation can lead to new ideas or even just reassurance that you're not the only one that's trying to figure these things out, right? So the key is to really set these conversations in the right environment, right? The talks are usually going to go better, over coffee or on a walk or in a setting where you both feel comfortable. So, definitely not in some loud bar or restaurant where you're shouting over the music or, there's people in and out and coming to the table and whatnot. So just think about those things if you are going to have these conversations. A good way to ease in is kind of with general questions, right? So instead of diving in with like, so how much debt do you have, right? No one wants to really admit that right off the bat. That might scare somebody off a little bit, right? So maybe instead you could ask, have you ever used one of those budgeting apps, right? I know we're all looking for a good one of those to help us out with our everyday budget. Or ask them what their, how did they save? How did they build up their emergency fund? Or maybe they haven't and they're also looking for tips, right? So it kind of keeps things a little more light and just, slowly and gently opens that door to having those conversations. And just pay attention to body language. So if they look uncomfortable or they're kind of giving short answers, that might be your cue to change the subject for now. But sometimes friends will surprise you and open right up once they know that you're interested or once they know that, you have that in common. So just remember that these conversations don't have to be all serious, right? Laugh about your financial missteps together. We probably all had them. One of my friends and I once swapped stories about, our impulse buys that we do on the regular that we probably regret, right? So, um, I've made dumb purchases before, like, a bread maker that I've only used once or, some fad thing that, thankfully usually can return those things, but we've all been there, right? So sharing those moments can really make those money conversations feel a little less intimidating. And finally, don't be afraid to share your financial dreams as well. So saying those things out loud, like, I'd love to save up for a trip to Europe, or I'm really trying to pay off my student loans right now. Those can lead to your friend suggesting, maybe strategies that they used, or even kind of joining you in that goal, right? Just like after the new year, maybe going to the gym with your friend was a goal, right? These money conversations can also be a goal. Very important. We're all dealing with it. So it really makes those money situations part of your actual friendship and support system, instead of just kind of being a taboo topic that you never want to breach, So just think about that a little more, even within your friendships. All right. The dreaded slide of loaning money, right? So we, this is a common thing, right? We loan money to friends or family. It's one of those things that might sound simple, but it can really get complicated fast. So this first stat up here, a Bankrate survey found that 60% of Americans have loaned money to someone close to them. But here's the downside. 37% said that they lost money doing it, and 21% said it actually damaged the relationship. So that's why it's so important to really set those boundaries before you even get asked that question about borrowing money, just so everyone knows ahead of time, what you're going to be comfortable with as far as doing those small loans. And you can be ready with that response and they can be ready with their reaction to your response, right? So, you might say, I can't afford to help you right now, but, is there another way that I can support you? So sometimes just being prepared for those conversations is going to make it go a little smoother. And if you do decide to loan money, just make sure that you outline your expectations for repayment clearly, right? Agreeing on a payment schedule between the two of you can really prevent those like awkward misunderstandings, about when or if the money is even coming back. So I've seen situations, I'm sure we all have, where someone, you know, assumed that it was a gift while, the person that lent the money was waiting for repayment and maybe watching them buy other things for themselves or go on trips or whatever, while the other person just thought, hey, okay, thanks for helping me out in that moment. Um, and the other person's just stewing at home, wondering when they're going to get repaid. So definitely a recipe for tension. So make sure the expectations are clear. And one golden rule, only loan what you can actually afford to live without, right? Honestly, in some cases, it's, better to think of it as a gift, even if you have set that expectation that it's a loan. But in your mindset, maybe you're just thinking it is a gift so that if it doesn't ever come back to you, you're not holding on to that resentment, right? And you know that you didn't put yourself in a bad financial situation by making that loan to them. And most importantly, never put yourself in a spot where, helping somebody else is gonna keep you from paying your own bills that month or reaching your own financial goals, right? Like if you don't have your emergency fund set up yet and you're trying to do that, and your child, your sibling, whoever it may be, asks you for money, is that the best place to be? If something does come up, are you going to have to now use credit cards to cover that because of you trying to help out this person? So while supporting others is a very generous thing to do, you don't want to leave yourself struggling in that situation. So definitely think about all those aspects before you are loaning money. So talking about money with partners. So this can definitely feel uncomfortable at first, depending on, how long you've known the person, kind of what type of relationship you have with them. But definitely, if you are sharing your life with somebody, this is a very important conversation to have. So definitely not every topic, not every detail when it comes to finances has to be discussed right away, right? The conversations will kind of grow over time as your relationship grows, right? So, maybe in the beginning you keep it simple, asking those lighter questions like, how much do you think is important to keep in an emergency fund, right? Or what's your biggest financial fear? So these are good kind of icebreaker questions that open that door without feeling too heavy, hopefully. And as things get more serious, you'll kind of want to go a little deeper, right? So that might mean asking about maybe student loans or credit card balances, or maybe even like pulling your credit reports together, right? One couple I knew would do like a money date night where they, ordered takeout and kind of sat down with their laptops and went through their credit reports and kind of turned something that would be a little more stressful into something that kind of made them more of a team. So hopefully it'll be positive as those relationships grow. And eventually you'll want to get really clear about the big picture, right? What you see as the big picture. So definitely those real questions like, what's our total debt? What investments for the future do we have, right? What happens after we reach these financial goals that we're trying to reach, our current financial goals, right? So those conversations definitely help make sure that you're kind of on that same page before taking other big steps in life, like buying a house, right? Or joining, combining your finances together, or, hopefully planning for retirement someday. So remember that all of these talks, definitely you don't want to go into them with a judgmental attitude, not about judgment. They're about understanding, right? You want to understand each other's habits and past experiences, and you want to understand each other's dreams with money, right? So then you can kind of move forward as that team that you need to be successful. So money conversations are going to look a little different before marriage versus after, right? So before marriage, it's kind of all about being transparent about things. You want to know what you're getting into together. So that means kind of laying everything out on the table, right? Student loans, credit card balances, auto loans, old medical bills that might still be in collection, right? So basically, if it's a debt, it should be part of this conversation. You also want to share credit reports, like I said. So talk about how you're handling your debt right now. If one person is just making minimum payments on all of their debts and the other is aggressively paying things down, that's a little bit of a mismatch, and you'll kind of want to address that, right? Address it earlier so there isn't that resentment down the road. Because if one person is putting, 80% of their paycheck towards their debt and the other person is still spending 80% of it on fun, that's going to lead to some of that resentment down the road. So this is also a time, to dream a little. Talk about, if you want to have families and what you want to do in retirement and just your vision for the future. So what does that look like to you? Do you want to retire in somewhere warm? Do you want to travel the world? Do you want to move closer to other family? So talking about that early is definitely going to help you plan together. And then after marriage, the focus kind of shifts, right? So now it's definitely about teamwork. One red flag is letting only one partner handle all of the money. So not only does that create that power imbalance, but if something happens to that partner, the other might be left completely in the dark about their finances, right? So finances really need to be a shared thing. So really just ask yourself, in your relationship, do we have this team mentality with money, or are we just kind of doing our own thing? All right. So a good strategy is to set aside a little fun money for each of you to have every month, something you can spend with no questions asked, right? And that way, no one feels like they have to justify every little, run to Starbucks or maybe a video game subscription or whatever it may be, right? So having that basis where you're setting aside for each person to spend as they want for that small amount can really be helpful. Still lets you feel like you have a little freedom in your financial journey once you're in that partnership. And finally, any financial plan that you create together should pass 3 tests. So is it good for our mental health? Is it good for our wallets? And does it hold true to our values, right? So hopefully those are all things that you've talked about, so you know where the other person stands, but kind of put it through that litmus test to make sure that you're on track there. And if it checks all those boxes, then you're definitely on the right track. All right, so this next section is a little heavier, but it's important to talk about. So money isn't just about budgets and bills. It can also be used as a tool of control in some situations. So financial abuse. This might be a term that you haven't really heard of, but you probably kind of get the gist here. So this happens when one person tries to limit or control another person's access to money. So it might look like a partner taking your paycheck and only giving you an allowance, hiding accounts from one another, or just refusing to let one of the partners be part of any of the financial decisions. So sadly, it often shows up in families, relationships, and sometimes can be part of a larger pattern of abuse. The statistics here are pretty striking. Financial abuse costs the U.S. economy over $15 billion every year. It's actually the most common form of elder abuse, right? So we've heard of that. So really just think about that, older adults that are being taken advantage of by the people that they trust the most, right? So also then there's financial infidelity. We see at the bottom of our screen there. So this isn't always as obvious, but can still be really damaging to a relationship. So that's when couples who share money are just kind of outrightly lying to each other about finances, right? Secretly opening a credit card on their own, hiding purchases, right? And just really keeping that debt that you've taken on a secret from your partner. I've heard of like one of my friends, hiding Amazon packages at the neighbor's house so that her spouse wouldn't notice some of that extra spending that she was doing. So yeah, just small things like that can, sometimes break trust if they're found out, right? So think think about those things. So both of those issues kind of come down to the same thing: trust and transparency. So whether it's abuse or dishonesty, when money is hidden or controlled unfairly, it really undermines the foundation of that relationship. So that's why that open, honest communication about finances is going to be very critical. So in the last slide, we kind of talked about the financial abuse, financial infidelity, those bigger picture issues when money is being used to control somebody. So now let's zoom in on the financial infidelity specifically and kind of look at some of the warning signs that you may see. So these are the little red flags that might pop up in everyday life, sometimes really gradually, so you don't notice until it really ends up being a bigger problem. So maybe your partner doesn't share household bills with you and kind of dodges your questions that might come up around finances, or you notice that they're getting calls from collectors, but they're kind of dismissing your concerns when you bring it up. So definitely can be a red flag if they don't want you to see their credit reports or their credit score, or they kind of, dismiss you from joining them in different financial planning meetings, maybe, about their retirement or whatever it may be. Sometimes those are the signs that can be, even more concrete, like, actual bills arriving in the mail for accounts that you didn't even know about, or items showing up on your credit report that you never applied for, right? That can happen a lot, and definitely in when they're legally bound, like a marriage, right? So all these behaviors can kind of chip away at that financial trust in a relationship, but being aware of them definitely gives you a chance to kind of step in early and have those conversations before it really gets a lot worse. All right, so here's just a little checklist. I'll just bring these all up, so if anyone wants to take a picture of this. But if you are needing to have conversations with a partner, this is kind of just a little checklist that you can go through. So preparing to talk, right? So like we said earlier, when you're talking to friends, choose a calm, comfortable, private place to have these conversations. Communicate beforehand that you both will be sharing financial information during this conversation so that no one's kind of blindsided by what you're going to bring up. Determine what to share. So you don't have to share everything during the first conversation, but be open about what you're both interested in knowing and currently feel comfortable sharing. Eventually, you should both know each other's debt loads, the type of debt that you're holding, credit scores, why those credit scores are what they are, and your net worth. Be open and honest. So avoid judgment and be honest with your partner. If needed, you need to take a break, just like we all do in a lot of difficult conversations. Maybe you need to step away for a minute. That's fine. But make sure you're making that commitment to return to the conversation and not put it off for years and years, right? So return to that conversation soon. Set a date where we will return to this conversation if you're feeling a little overloaded with sharing so much. Discuss visions of the future. So after that initial information is shared, what are your thoughts for the future and how realistic are they given what you know now? Create a game plan. So come up with specific steps you can take to work towards your future financial goals together. Write those down, right? Hang them up on the kitchen cabinet, so you're looking at them every day. And then come back to those and change them if needed over time. Adapt those to life changes and things like that, right? Have those check-ins. So with that joint strategy in mind, set those routine meetings. Maybe it's just once a quarter, or maybe it's a quick 15-minute conversation, on Sunday night, whatever, to kind of discuss your progress and adjust those goals if needed. So whatever works best in your situation, but definitely make sure that those conversations are a regular part of your relationship. All right, so now that we've looked at some of those bigger picture conversations that you can have with your partner, let's get into some practical tips here. So these are everyday things that we can do to kind of help make these conversations a little smoother and a little less stressful, right? So using the sandwich method. So this is where you start the conversation with something positive, share the concern, and then end with another positive, right? So, for example, here on the board, I love spending time with you and it's really important to me, but going to a fancy restaurant this weekend just isn't in my budget right now. Could we grab a coffee and go for a walk instead so we still get that time together, right? So, you love spending time with the person, you really want to do this. It's just not going to happen this weekend. I don't have the money for it, but let's do something else. Let's find another activity we can do together so we can still have that quality time. So it's kind of a little bit softer, softens things up, and shows that you really value that relationship, but you're also setting that boundary, right? So that's a good method. Suggesting alternatives also, right? So you don't have to say no and leave it at that. Maybe you swap dinner out for like a cozy movie night at home or a game night with friends and snacks, right? So the point is still to connect without blowing the budget. Discuss your budget and plan ahead of time. So a lot of awkwardness comes from unspoken expectations, right? We all know that, not just around financial stuff, just in relationships in general. Those unspoken expectations can come after you. So, for instance, do you and your friend usually split the bill evenly when you go out for dinner, or does everyone pay for exactly what they ordered? But talking about it up front is going to help avoid those surprises. Even something as simple as agreeing on a restaurant within budget before you actually go can make the outing feel a lot smoother for some people. And then saying no politely, right? So sometimes even with planning, you may need to decline, and that's okay, right? You can say no in a way that's respectful of your relationship, like, I'd love to join, but it's just not in my budget right now. So people who actually care about you are going to respect that boundary and that you're actually voicing it, right? That you're not just going to be like, oh, my dog's sick, I have to stay home. Like be honest with your friends and family and let them know what's really going on and what boundaries that you're setting for yourself because you want to reach those financial goals, right? All right. So as we've seen, money weaves its way into nearly every relationship that we have, right? So whether that's with family or friends or partners, and while it really can definitely create challenges, it also gives us opportunities to strengthen those connections when we approach these things with honesty and planning and a willingness to listen, right? So as we wrap up today, I encourage you to think about one small step that you could take. Maybe it's starting a conversation that you've been putting off, or setting that small boundary with family, or planning ahead for an upcoming expense instead of just kind of winging it when it comes up, right? So those little changes can really help make a big difference over time. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to see if we have any questions in our Q&A. Oh, so somebody asked about GreenPath. Yeah, so GreenPath Financial Wellness is a longtime partner of MSU FCU. They can help with budgeting plans, with debt management. I know we've probably all seen, commercials on TV about debt repayment plans and things like that. So those are sometimes different businesses handle them a little bit differently. GreenPath has some really good strategies and can really help, especially if you're trying to tackle a lot of debt and it feels overwhelming. They're really great at walking you through that. They do provide free consultations as well. So definitely check them out, greenpath.com. And they have a local office. They can call 800 number. You can schedule in-person, phone, virtual sessions with them. And they have just a ton of financial education resources on their website. They have different like toolkits, checklists you can print off, budgeting worksheets, all those things. So yes, I believe that GreenPath is a great resource. They actually do some of our webinars here. We have them as guest speakers for a couple webinars a year too. So great people to work with. I've known a lot of, personal friends that have used them and had great success. So really awesome company to partner with. And we definitely suggest that you call them if you are kind of looking into that, especially with tackling debt and getting that repaid for sure. right, just gonna check here and see if there's anything else that came up. Oh, good. Somebody else mentioned that they love GreenPath. They've used them for years, thanks to MSU FCU. So good. I'm so glad. Yes, I mean we always are. If when I used to be a loan officer, if there was a reason that I had to deny a loan for somebody because it wasn't in their budget or they already had too much debt, we always provided that resource to reach out to GreenPath. And I had people that would come back to me a year late, 6 months later, a year later, 5 years later, however long it took them, but so happy with the service that they received and all the knowledge and experience they learned working with GreenPath. So I'm glad to hear that some of you have used them and had a really good experience. All right, so if you guys wouldn't mind, you can scan the QR code to take a small feedback survey, or it will actually pop up when you exit out of the Zoom also. So you have a couple different options for that. But we definitely love to get your feedback on tonight's session, get some ideas for what you all might want to talk about in the future. So definitely fill that out. And then that QR code on the right will bring you to our financial education landing page with a lot of different resources and different tools and calculators and all sorts of things. So check out all those other resources that we have for you guys. Definitely very important part of MSU FCU's values and mission is to spread financial literacy to all ages of people. So we're really glad that you all could be a part of this. And I know some of the names I saw on the list, you guys come back and always want to learn. And so that just really, really makes me feel so great. So thank you for that. Also wanted to let you know of the rest of our seminars and webinars that we have coming up for the rest of the month. So we have started doing some lunch and learns. So if you do have time midday, we are having some in-person lunch and learns at our headquarters building in East Lansing, where we feed you lunch and we do a little financial education. So these are definitely geared towards members. They have a lot more, reference to using tools within your online account and things like that. So those will be on March 16th and March 31st. March 31st session, we're going to talk about all the financial technology. You may have heard that word, fintech. So a lot of financial institutions, partner with a lot of different fintechs that can just really help make your financial journey a little bit easier. Budgeting, fraud prevention, all these things. So we're going to talk about all of the fintech opportunities and tools that you have access to as a MSU FCU member on March 31st at noon. It's usually just about an hour long, so noon to 1. Even if you're working, maybe you can take your lunch break during that time, head over to headquarters and see us then. And then if you are in the age where you're, dealing with maybe filing for Social Security soon, or already in that phase of life, on March 17th at noon, it will be a virtual webinar by our friends at Silver talking about maximizing women's Social Security for retirement. So we hope that you all will join us again soon. But thank you all for being here. And I hope you all have a great evening. We'll see you soon. Bye.